Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Midwestern Marks live stream. We're finally here. Been in the back room for a little bit, but I am back from Las Vegas for my week-long trip. You're probably going to be able to hear it in my voice today. It's a little hoarse, and my voice kept cracking at practice today when I was running youth practice. So apologies for that, but I'm very excited to be back with you. Carlos has been carrying the boats in my absence. Streaming a whole bunch, which is going to be a new thing for us. Carlos is going to be trying to join me like 3 days a week with these streams. So I'm just super, super, super excited about that and what it means for this show and for the audience that we're going to be able to reach and the education we're going to be able to provide. So today, I'll recap my trip to Vegas a little bit. We'll talk about Vegas and the history of it and the casinos. And then we've got a Tim Dillon clip talking about the war in Ukraine that somebody sent us to react to, as well as a Russell Brand clip talking about the recent debacle with Tucker Carlson. So a whole lot of hot button political issues, theoretical issues, and we're going to break them all down for you today. So thank you for being with us. We'll play the intro, and then we'll get right into it. All right. Thanks to Samuel Black right off the bat, starting the stream with a $20 super sticker. Big time. Thank you so much for supporting our project, Samuel. Really appreciate that. What a great way to start the stream. I don't know if it's Samuel. It might be Samael. I might have been saying your name wrong all along, Samael. I'm sorry. And you gave us a $20 super sticker, and I couldn't even get your name right. But thank you
Let
very
us
much for that.
let us know in the chat how to pronounce it because he's a frequent contributor, financial contributor to the institute. So thank you, Samael or Samuel. This is like the Key and Peele sketch where they're butchering the name. The teacher is butchering the names of the students. Um,
Aaron.
Aaron, yeah.
D nice. That's funny. Once I get a name wrong in my head, like once I read it a certain way, I just say it that way until I'm corrected. Sam Ale, but it's all good. Got you, Sam Ale. Thank you, Sam
Mm.
Ale. Sorry about that. Get it right in the future. To probably answer this question too before we jump into our content. Did Vaush respond to you about the debate? Yes, we just noticed that. I just before we hopped on checked the Twitter DMs. He sent a response. I don't know what he said yet, but hopefully that will be happening soon. And hopefully that will be a tool that we can use to bring people to Midwestern Marks. We know what Vaush is. We know he's not an honest actor. We know he's working backwards from his conclusions. He's, a liberal and imperialist. And he decides what he believes, and then he tries to argue from that rather than looking at the evidence and using the evidence to decide what he believes. He's not a dialectical materialist. But he has an audience of like 200,000 people at least, probably closer to like 300, 400,000 people. So we are going to try and use that opportunity to boost the platform of Midwestern Marks, boost the true message of dialectical and historical materialism and revolutionary struggle. So yeah, look forward to that. Or, you can dread that, I guess. That's what some people I'm sure are doing.
Yeah, we had a comrade reach out and say, that's a waste of time. Don't be trying to debate that sleazeball. Just get to the working class in your community and talk to them. And, you know, I get that sentiment, but we have to realize that the vast majority of people are online today for like 8 hours a day. And these have become like fields of ideological struggles, superstructural terrains where we have to wage a war of position on. And that means, you know, stooping to the level of a Vaush to engage in a debate. I'm just glad that we have Eddie to do it, and that I don't have to volunteer for that sort of activity because I don't have the patience for it. You know, I would all the like 6 to 10 years of re-education that I've had to get the Miami out of me would all go to shit in the middle of a debate with that guy. I'll start throwing out Spanish cuss words, and I'd be so mad. So I'm
I
just
can't
glad.
even imagine. I mean, it would be great television.
Right, right. But mm-mm.
Thank you, Alicia Chaffin. Happy Red Flag over Reichstag Day, the day that the Red Army won the Battle of Berlin, secured the defeat of the Nazis. Yes, very cool. Very great day in history. Great victory for the communists over the fascists, which, of course, we know all of World War II was. In every country domestically, the communists were the first ones to fight and die against the fascists. And on the global stage, as capitalism had reached its global imperialist stage, which is what caused World War II, it was the communist, socialist Soviet Union who beat back the Nazi hordes and saved the world from fascist rule. So we must prevent the liberals from rewriting history in that sort of sick and twisted, disgusting way that they do, claiming that fascism and communism can be equated when, you know, millions of our comrades in the past fought and died to defeat fascism. We need to uphold their legacy and set the record straight on that, because communists have been the first to die fighting fascists, and it'll be the same in the future, right? And it'll be the same in America if there's a fascist force that needs to be fought and combated, and they'll do the same thing. They'll claim that the communists are just as bad, despite the fact that it'll be us at the forefront of combating that fascist movement. So, yeah, great historical legacy there to remember.
26 million lives lost. You know, it was 95% of the fighting against Germany was done on the Eastern Front, with the Soviet Union being, you know, the main fighting force that defeated the Nazis. And then after that, you know, most historians agree that it was one of the main reasons why, once the Soviet Red Army turned to Japan, why Japan gave up, not the nukes. It was because they were scared that the Red Army would do to Japan what the Japanese were doing to the Chinese, which was just brutal torture. Um, so there's this phrase by Marshal Zhukov that he says right after the glorious victory of the Red Army. He says, "We liberated Europe from fascism, but they will never forgive us for it." And what do you get right after the end of the Second World War? You know, idiots equating communism with fascism and Nazism, and trying to draw these parallels of Hitler and Stalin, and it's absolutely despicable. And now look at the West. Um, the, uh, the West, which is led by peoples whose grandparents were supporters of Nazism, or if not Nazis themselves, are now again supporting Nazism in the name of quote unquote democracy, while claiming that the people that are fighting against them, and therefore fighting against the Nazis, are the actual Nazis. It's just completely topsy turvy. But
Absolutely. Thank you, K Grenade, for renewing your YouTube membership. Consistent supporter. Thank you, Ross. Ross is obviously a super, super, super consistent supporter of Midwestern Marks, and I've really been enjoying Ross's Substack lately,
mm-hmm.
talking about some of these philosophers and critiquing a lot of the philosophers who he had liked in the past, and um, talking. His last one was about how everything, changes. Everything's in a constant state of change, and we have to see our material conditions for what they are now and the place of these philosophers within, our existing material conditions. So this is really interesting stuff. You can follow Ross on Instagram if you want to check out his Substack and all his great work. Thank you so much for that, Ross, and all the support that you've given us.
We republished the Substack entry titled "Frozen," where he reacted to the interview that I did with J.B. Foster, and it takes a tremendous level, not just of political, but of just personal human maturity to be able to rethink some of the beliefs. Because I mean, I've read all of these guys that are part of the tradition of philosophical rationalism, and they are really enjoyable reads. I actually I spent most of my morning reading existentialists and Walter Kaufman, and it's a very enjoyable read. But it is important to criticize, though, because of the implications of that worldview. And I think you can separate the leisure reading, the enjoyment of it, from the other stuff. It doesn't mean you have to stop reading, your Bergson and your Kierkegaard and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can still read that stuff and you should. And it's really, as someone who's not a philosopher, as someone whose focus has been on geopolitics and other stuff, it's been really interesting. Or, I mean, it's great to hear from philosophers, addressing the arguments of those I haven't had the time to read, or maybe we'll never get the time to read. Like, I don't know if I'll ever get around to Heidegger. I would like to, but I've got other stuff to read and other stuff to do. So, yeah, all very valuable. Is there any Midwestern Marks merch available? Thank you so much for the $2. I just sent the link to our merch store. It's right under the store on our website where you can get our books. And it might be in our link tree too. Maybe I might have to update that link actually, but on our website, midwestern-marks.myshopify.com. We need to get a hat in there. Everybody's asking for a hat, and I don't think that we have any hats right now, but we'll get that up. You can get stickers, hoodies. Actually, I'll show it on the screen right now so people can see. And of course, there's going to be like anarchists or something attacking us for this. Like, how dare you have merch? But it's all fairly, it's decently priced and similar to our books. This gives you a way to support us financially and still get something in return. You still get, a physical object. So even though the labor of the workers who made it was probably exploited, that's just how capitalism works. And I really got to get myself one of these stickers, or one of these stickers. These are cool.
There's no ethical consumption under capitalism, but there's consumption that can help provide funds for people fighting and waging a revolutionary struggle. So that's
Absolutely. Is this your dog, by the way, Carlos? Do you have
no,
a
that's a random. That's too. That dog costs way too much for me to ever even think about owning one of those. I got the cheap, lowest brand name dogs. They're like the equivalent of like Payless shoes. I got Chihuahuas, two Chihuahuas. They're so bad. All they do is bark at everything that passes by, and they're like scared of the baby. The baby tries to pet it, they run away. Just lowest quality dog out there, but I love them.
For sure. That's all that matters. I wanted the dog that my parents had growing up, but it's like you can only get it from a breeder. They're like $2,000. I'm like, nope. I'll rescue a dog when I'm ready. I had this comment from Jacob Starr to talk, not to spring this on you, Carlos. I know we didn't discuss about this, but Jacob had asked about the Noam Chomsky connection with Epstein. Extremely interesting. And then now we have a super chat from J Flow Grappling Academy. Thank you, J Flow, and shout out to the fellow socialist grapplers out there. But any thoughts on the Chomsky Epstein connection? I mean, I haven't looked too much into it to see. It was just that they met and Chomsky was in his calendar, and he said that they discussed political and academic topics, was what Chomsky said. I mean, there's always been a theory among tankies that Chomsky is controlled opposition, that he goes as far as you can go, criticizing imperialism and calling out the empire, while still filtering people into non-revolutionary movements and shitting on the Bolsheviks and shitting on any, positive socialist experiment. So it's like he'd be like the furthest left wing of controlled opposition, to where his critiques of the empire and stuff are good, but he's ultimately filtering people who have those good critiques of the empire into pessimism and doomerism and anti-communism. And obviously Parenti destroyed him and destroyed those arguments better than anyone in Black Shirts and Reds. And I think, I don't know if the Epstein connection makes me think that, it's certainly not like a smoking gun. They totally could have just met up once when, I mean, it was after the allegations had come out, though. So it is sketchy. I don't want to downplay it at all. I don't think it's, a smoking gun proof that Chomsky's CIA, but it's certainly smoke. And where there's smoke, there's always some kind of fire. But I don't know. What are your thoughts, Carlos? I'm interested to hear.
It's a hard issue. I was asked it yesterday on yesterday's stream, and I wanted to talk with you and Noah about it before commenting on it publicly, because we've done an interview with Chomsky for the Journal of American Socialist Studies, and his responses for all of our questions were pretty good. And I mean, we've gotten to a point in the left where some of the very basic things that constituted what the quote unquote left was have just been eroded and replaced by certain forms of identity politics, which, as I've described very often, is really just class politics from above, the class politics of the PMC and the ruling class used to separate working people. So like we asked him about like class struggle and the centrality of it, and he gave standard good responses, and his responses to the proxy war against Russia have been as good as you can really expect from like a mainstream person in the U.S. And I think maybe last month or something, there was this thing going on in Cuba to promote the lifting of the blockade, and like his whole face and lecture was featured. It was like through holographs. It was featured on the University of Havana. So like Cuba seems to be perfectly fine with working with him and in solidarity in the places where there's unity. And few intelligence departments are as good as the one that Cuba has. Like they're able to smell anything the empire is doing, and like the assassination attempts that they've tried to do on Maduro have been stopped thanks to Cuban intelligence. So I'm sure that if Chomsky was like CIA or something, they'd be careful allying with him. I don't think he's CIA. I think he comes from this tradition of anarchism, which naturally leads to some antagonistic positions with the communist movement. There's other socialist movements that he supports and socialist revolutions that he supports, and there's other places where it doesn't matter whether he supports it or not. What matters is whether he's willing to object to the U.S.'s warmongering against those places, and most of the time he is. So I think he's still largely a positive force, and some of the left McCarthyism that Parenti described, I think it might have died down a bit with overthrow of the Soviet Union, but we still have to criticize him in those areas. But I think it's fair to work with him. And the Epstein connection, I mean, I don't know, dude. I haven't looked into all the information behind it, so the judgment that I can pass on it is at best abstract, but it could mean something. It could not mean anything. I don't know yet. I haven't looked into the issue enough.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, and obviously, like, everybody knows Epstein didn't kill himself. It's kind of crazy that, like, so many high up people, are engaged in something like pedophilia. And it's disgusting, and it's people are rightfully disgusted when they see anybody connected to that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's smoke, but it's not fire. And there were people who had like a blurry image of Fidel talking to Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein like 15 years ago. Like, okay, but what does this mean, right? Does this mean they were at the same place, and having a discussion? Like, Jeffrey Epstein was an extremely powerful person. It's not like every single conversation he had with someone was about setting up a trip to his island. There's potential that people who met with him or people who were in his calendar had nothing to do with any of that. So that's also worth pointing out. And just I guess don't don't just dismiss it as nothing. It matters, but don't. I don't know if we need to jump to conclusions, especially when, like you said, Chomsky's done a lot of good. But I always say that too. I'm always like, Chomsky, he's good. He's so anti-imperialist. He pushes people in the right direction. And then you go back and you watch his lecture about Leninism, and you're like, what the fuck is this? It's like,
Gulag.
this guy sucks. So I mean, that's always what it is when it comes to allying with anarchists, though. Work together where you can, but understand that they have those bizarro positions. This is really interesting here. I want to get to this. Matthew Smith says, "Sup, guys? I just wanted to send some support. Thank you very much, Matthew. Make sure everybody is aware that we're likely striking at UPS at the end of August. Need public support, absolutely, and we are going to be here to give that public support, cover the strike efforts." We covered this the other day, just in passing. The day before I left for Vegas, I was kind of tired from cutting weight and didn't cover it as much as I wanted to. But this is from PSL, their magazine, talking about the UPS workers preparing for this historic showdown with the corporate giant. Workers preparing for strike. So this is historic. It's going to be an epic battle between the UPS workers and corporate. Really pumped for this. Really pumped to see the workers getting organized. Very cool that we have Matthew, a UPS worker, in our audience, and I'm sure we have more who are actually going to be a part of this class struggle. So hopefully some Midwestern Marx members will be able to help lead the struggle, help further the struggle, and help educate their coworkers about Marxism and the need for socialism to ultimately alleviate the problems that unions are there to combat. And also, Cade Grenade, I know, is a UPS worker, a FedEx worker. So we have lots of delivery workers in the audience, consistently watching our content and getting educated. So it's great to see these vital industries getting organized, fighting back against corporate. And yeah, we hope to see more of it, and we can't wait to follow this struggle.
Yeah, I saw some interviews yesterday and May Day with some UPS leaders over there, and they seem to be incredibly class conscious. They're urging other unions and other workers to back up their struggle, as they would do with their struggles. And, just the fact that they would be out on May Day is so significant, just because it's not a federal holiday in the U.S. We celebrate Labor Day September 4th. So that just shows the level of, international working class consciousness that's a lot more advanced than some of the stuff we've seen from the union movement, which has been largely destroyed and now is coming back. So all good there. And I think there's this tendency that we're seeing now with the union movement where they're growing more and more militant. And as it's growing more militant, it's proliferating, and new unions are popping up, and old unions are electing, more militant presidents, such as the Teamsters with O'Brien. And I think recently the UAW also elected a fairly progressive and militant leader. So that's I think where socialism is going to grow out of, the most militant and advanced segments of that growing labor movement.
Absolutely, and it's crazy to see how fast things are happening, and with stuff like this, you can see how the potential for revolution is there and how quickly things can happen. Like we always say in Russia, 10 years before the revolution, nobody thought revolution was possible. They all thought they were playing the long game. But by playing the long game, by educating and organizing, revolution culminated faster than they thought. It materialized faster than they thought. So as someone was saying up here, this is a major part of the supply chain, delivery workers, especially in modern consumerist America, where a lot of people are reliant on delivery for their everyday life. This is going to be a huge hope for the economy. Here it is. And yeah, it could grow into something more for sure. And Matthew says somebody needs to organize FedEx somehow. They make them contractors. It's really difficult. And yeah, that is the biggest thorn in the side of organizing. It's one of the dirtiest tricks that the capitalists play. Carlos wrote a really good article on it a while back that I should pull up. What was the name of that, Carlos?
It was Prop 22. It was this proposition that passed in California, allowing workers, specifically in the industries such as Uber, Lyft, and such, allowing workers to be classified as independent contractors by their employers. And I don't know, this just pushes the move towards what they call flexibilization. And I have this sort of dirty joke that all that means is that, as in sex, when you're more flexible, you can just get fucked easier, and that just means that your employer can mess you over easier, exploit you easier, and not have the sort of responsibilities that he would have towards you if you were considered a worker. So the it's just one of the most insidious tactics that have been developed to beat back the labor movement by not even considering workers anymore, considering them independent contractors.
Absolutely, and it happens in a ton of industries, really high profile ones like FedEx, and high profile firms like FedEx and Lyft and Uber, and even the UFC and the WWE. This is what they do. And now Dana White, this is a little bit of a thing, a personal thing for me because I'm into combat sports, but Dana White, the CEO of the UFC, has started this power slap league, right? Where people just stand there with their hands behind their back and they slap each other, and they're getting paid $2,000 for that to show up and get CTE. And then not only are they not allowed to form a union, but they're kept as private contractors, and literally given like this is what a former UFC fighter came out and said. He was offered $2,000 for this slap thing where people are getting knocked out, getting concussions. So really like a blatant and really public, open example of how this private contractor scheme works. And it's just really disgusting. And so these people like Dana White don't have to consider their workers and give them the regular benefits that workers are supposed to have. And if you look at like even the UK, it's so much better than this. It's so much easier to form a union, because of the level of class struggle, I guess, and various factors in the last 40 years of neoliberalism in the US. But like these right to work laws, these private contractor efforts, they're disgusting, right? Like this is the people, conservatives in this country like to say socialists are wimpy. Socialists just want to be handed everything, blah, blah, blah. Like there is nothing more weak, nothing more wimpy than letting your boss tell you that you can't form a union, letting your boss tell you that you can't organize against him, that you have to do what he says, that you have to remain a private contractor. Not saying workers in that situation are weak and wimpy. I'm saying accepting that situation and just taking it from your boss is the worst thing you can do. And we need to organize, get together, and fight back against that, and assert our strength as workers, because our labor is at the center of the economy. Our labor is what creates everything. The labor of those delivery workers is vital to maintaining the entire system. So it's about time we use that to our advantage and struggle against these lazy parasite bosses taking millions and millions and millions of dollars home in profits every year, while the working class delivery workers in our audience, like Cade Grenade and Matthew, are struggling to pay bills or whatever while working their butts off. So without further ado, I suppose we should jump into our first video for today. Would you like to react to Russell Brand talking about Tucker Carlson, or would you like to start with Tim Dillon talking about Ukraine and the Democratic National Convention?
I think the Dylan one was like 2 minutes, so I feel like if we do Brand first, they can get out of hand, and it could make the Dylan one come up after an hour or so of discussion, which would make it kind of tiring. So I'd say Dylan and then Brand.
I think that's a great idea. This is why we ask the philosopher.
It was an intro to college course that I took, like my first year, ages ago. And one of the things it said was get the small things done first, so that you can tackle the bigger things with a clearer mind and with less stress. And that is one thing I learned from that class that I still apply.
I love it. Someone needs to start uploading little clips or rants on stream to TikTok or something. We try to. It's just really difficult. If anyone wants to help us with that and help us edit those clips, let us know, because that would be an act of labor that would be huge for Midwestern Marks. I just wanted to point that out before we jump into this video. But this is comedian Tim Dillon talking about Ukraine, talking about the DNC. Here's the tweet. And we've covered Tim Dillon before on stream. Comedian. I think he voted for Bernie. He considers himself like a Republican, but he does a lot of political commentary. Really interesting guy. He took part. He was selling subprime
Almost
mortgages.
certain coup.
I don't know.
Putin's out.
He was selling some subprime mortgages for the financial sector when the economy crashed in 2008. So just a really interesting product of history and product of our material conditions. I feel like Tim Dillon is. So let's hear him talk about Ukraine here.
Almost certain coup. Putin's ousted. He knows that. Or that they leave and say, sorry, our bad. Or the second option, they use nuclear weapons, or they continue to fight in Ukraine. We've done nothing to bring about any resolution here where Russia can save face and we can have some type of solution. It seems like it's a very foolhardy foreign policy to isolate Russia in the way that we have and basically give them two options: absolute total defeat, or God forbid them using a nuclear weapon, or the continuation of this war and the death of more Ukrainians.
Well, to be clear, the United States and Ukraine have reached out to Russia to have peace talks.
Yeah,
like they've tried.
Tim Dillon had the typical Democrat on his show. I didn't know he was talking to him. Is this the Democratic kid?
Yeah.
So, little personal story about this kid. We were when I was really blowing up on TikTok before they just started banning us outright. This kid was, I wouldn't say we were friends, but we knew of each other. We were acquaintances during the Trump administration, when it was easy for a lot of liberals to pretend like they had socialistic values, just by shitting on Trump all the time. But he was big on pushing people to vote for Biden. And the idea was pushing Biden left. That's what he kept saying. We can push Biden left. We can push Biden left. Then, 2 days after Biden takes office, he launches missiles at Syria because he's an imperialist and that's all he ever has been. And then this kid comes out defending it, saying, here's why these missile strikes were justified. Here's why they were good. And it's since been shown that the Biden administration was likely paying him and other influencers to do this. So I am like, okay, I see a bunch of my friends are making criticisms of him on TikTok, and I go to make my criticism of him, and I'm blocked. So after this guy pretended to be my friend because I was anti-Trump for a year or two on TikTok, he preemptively blocked me because he knew I wouldn't be okay with him supporting missile strikes just because a Democrat did it. He knew I was going to call him out. So it wasn't like I called him out and then he blocked me. No, he said, I'm going to make this video defending Biden's missile strikes on Syria, and Eddie Liger is going to call me out. So I'm going to preemptively block him before he can call me out, which is something else. One of the proudest moments of my life, that these Democrats know that I would call them out for launching missiles at Syria. But yeah, very interested to see what he had to say to Tim Dillon.
Quite extensively, and on your China
it's
point,
actually been reported that we've discouraged peace talks.
I think that's
that's actually
fake
been
news.
incredibly
Fake news.
reported.
Not
incredibly reported.
Because that source, right? I think Boris Johnson went to Ukraine and talked to Zelensky or something.
Well, first of all, we're the United States. NATO, we are giving them all the money. We're giving them all the weapons. How hard are we pushing peace talks?
There's a good chance that they only know about Boris Johnson because of our videos. Like, there's a very good chance, because I have made a million videos about this article from People's Dispatch about how Boris Johnson was sent to Ukraine by NATO to block up peace agreements. And a handful of other videos about another People's Dispatch article explaining that even Ukrainian outlets and Ukrainian government officials think that the U.S. is the biggest obstacle to peace in the region. So there's a chance that they only even know that that's a thing because of our TikToks that they've seen. But hilarious that they would deny it with no evidence, no substance, just deny it because we're probably getting paid by the Biden administration to be his campaign team online.
Well, I think it's interesting how it's interesting the position that Dillon is taking, and it's also one that I think Rogan has developed into as of relatively recent. And yeah, I mean, he did mention something. He was like, there's two options. The first one is like Russia backing out and just giving up and saying, okay, we lost. That's just not an option, just because of what's at stake and the very clear red line that they have been laying for like 2 decades now that has been crossed. And it's an existential threat that Russia is dealing with. If Ukraine joins NATO and gets access to the capabilities that NATO has, it's an existential threat. So they're very clear that it's going to be a fight basically until they get what they're demanding, which are very sensible, extremely sensible demands. They've been trying to do it the peaceful way for the last 8 years. They were played with because while they were engaging in peace talks with the Minsk Accords, now the West admits that the Minsk Accords were really only a way of buying time so that they can arm Ukraine for this proxy war against Russia. So, I mean, the only way to really find peace would be to attack the people that have proliferated the war and who have prevented peace, which is the West, NATO, and the more Nazi and fascistic elements that are in Ukraine. I can't help but think that the Ukrainian people at some point, after all this suffering, will realize that they're just being used as cannon fodder in a global power struggle where it's the West and the U.S. specifically struggling to sustain a crippling and moribund global hegemony that sooner or later will fall.
Yeah, and someone says it'll be interesting to see what these people do after the whole illusion in Ukraine collapses, and I'm sure they'll just lie. Like, these people are professional liars. There was one guy shared an article from the Cato Institute saying, the US is willing to fight to the last Ukrainian. And they were quoting like, establishment think tanks and really powerful people who were saying this, pushing this idea that we need them to fight to the last Ukrainian. And I shared that article, and these people attacked me for using a conservative source. It's like even the conservatives are admitting that the establishment is doing something disastrous right now and destructive and self-destructive. Like, the fact that they're a conservative source pointing it out shows how bad it is, that even the friggin' conservatives, a lot of the conservatives realize at this point. So a lot of these people are just liars and smear merchants, and they'll just, they'll lie and say that, nope, the evidence at the time, or my positions were correct based on the evidence we had at the time, meaning what mainstream media was telling us at the time. And yeah, these guys also denied that they were being paid by the DNC. They're only being paid by a company who brings them money, or who manages them and takes money from the DNC. So not directly by the DNC. Wouldn't want to accuse them of anything.
If we're literally flooding the country with what, we're not requiring them. We should literally say, you need to have peace talks, or we're not going to fund this war with no end in sight.
I think the idea was that we're not going to start talking peace until Russia agrees to, stop just mass murdering civilians and committing war crimes.
It's a war, and that's unrealistic. Okay, you have to come to the table.
Exactly.
So I understand when you're talking about sanity, you say Donald Trump's a lunatic. I might agree with you, but I see 4 years of Donald Trump. We're not in a lot of foreign entanglements. We're not on the verge of a real problem with Russia and China, to be honest. I'm seeing right now this bellicose foreign policy led by neocons, war hawks, who are now all on the Democratic side. Bill Kristol hates Donald Trump. All of these guys that supported the Iraq war hate Donald Trump. They are now all apparatchiks for Biden's administration. They're on MSNBC. They are pushing war. They are pushing the continuation of not only this war, they're pushing maybe further conflicts with China. So to me, when you talk about sanity, I say to myself, that seems insane.
That's on the money. And it's important to mention that one of the things they said, which is that we can't begin to have peace talks while Russia is murdering civilians. And this whole operation has not only been economic, it has not only been, military. It's been tied to a propaganda machine that has been at its core, to be as effective as it can be, dehumanizing of the Russian people. It's been extremely dehumanizing. And part of what they have done to help achieve this dehumanization of the Russian people and to paint them as barbarians has been to say that Russia's murdering civilians. And it literally could not be farther from the truth. Russia has done everything it possibly can to make sure that the places that it attacks, that there are no civilians. And on the contrary, the Ukrainian forces, which have been led by the Azov Battalion, which is a fascist neo-Nazi battalion, have done everything they can to make sure that the sites through which they're waging their fighting are sites that people are still in. There have been countless reports of people trying to flee those areas and being threatened with death if they flee by these Nazi battalions, because they want that atrocity propaganda. They want the world to think that Russia's actually killing people. And since they're not doing it and there's no evidence, and people are going to ask for evidence and not find any, they need to fabricate that circumstance by forcing people to stay into areas that are being bombed, because that's where the military combatants are. So it's a very despicable, overturning of what is actually going on. And I don't see it lasting much longer. You look at the statistics in the U.S. for the favorability of this war, and it's just been plummeting. The vast majority of Americans are getting to a point where they're sick and tired of this, and Europe's been there for quite a while now. So it's just the ruling elite that's in favor of this war, and that's going to create tremendous conditions if we know how to use it for revolution, along with all these other crises that are taking place now, these objective revolutionary conditions developing in our countries. This is going to just intensify that. It's going to over determine all the other contradictions that already exist.
Which shows that imperialism is in fact a stage of capitalism. So all the economic ill effects that are being felt by the people in Europe right now, people in France, people in the UK, and people in the US are connected to this imperialist intervention. Our resources, our taxes are being sent to, give weapons to Ukrainian neo-Nazi militias rather than being funneled to fix the railways or whatever, or raise people's wages or bring people health care. And there was just another toxic railway derailment the other day, and I didn't even see it on the news or on Marxist Twitter. I saw one of my wrestling friends from high school post about it on Facebook, a country Republican guy posting about the train derailment and the effects that these are going to have, or that this has on the environment, on people, on our health. So people are concerned about this. People realize this, and the more that they're becoming aware of it, the more their money is being sent to Ukraine. And we're being told that we need to do it for human rights, while the Ukrainians are literally setting up military, putting military units behind civilian areas, behind apartment buildings, so that they can use atrocity propaganda. And when Amnesty International called this out, the DNC had a collective meltdown and freaked out because they were pointing out the truth. But it is the truth, and more people are becoming aware of it, and more people are becoming aware of capitalist imperialism and are against it. And it'd be really, really interesting to hear what the mood in Ukraine is right now, like how many people in Ukraine are against this. But it's hard to say, because all the opposition media outlets, all the opposition parties, all the communists have been banned and outlawed. So you can literally get arrested for speaking out against the Nazi puppet government that the U.S. put in power. So the idea that we're supporting that government for freedom and democracy is so freaking hilarious. And you got to wonder how many Ukrainians have seen through it from the beginning, or are now starting to be like, this is messed up. Our country's being destroyed.
I wonder how much of the discourse that's considered to be from Ukrainians has come from people in the diaspora, because the diaspora, specifically in the U.S., is extremely nationalist. And we have a contributor to our institute, Kayla Papuchet. She's working on this documentary project, Bandera in New York, or Bandera in the Big Apple, that talks about all of these civil society groups and institutions that have embedded themselves in the U.S., that have tremendous economic and political lobbying power, and that spew this nationalist rewriting of Ukrainian history that's aimed at supporting what is going on now, and basically the fascist state that Ukraine has had for at least the last 8 years since the coup that ousted Viktor Yanukovych. So follow that project on Twitter if you're not already, Bandera in the Big Apple, I believe. If not, follow Caleb Popichet. But yeah, I wonder how much of the narrative on what's considered to be Ukrainian voices is coming from the diaspora, because they do that with Cuba. They say, oh my God, Cubans are protesting against the government, or Cubans feel this way about the revolution, and they'll tell you the voices of people in Miami and Tampa. So, yeah. You're muted.
I was just saying, sorry, I had myself muted up. Same with Tibet. I don't know if there is a free Tibet movement in China. Probably not, because everyone knows how stupid that sounds. Unless you're like descendant of the ruling feudal elites, the landlord class. The free Tibet movement exists in the diaspora, and in a lot of cases with people who are directly paid by NGOs, the NED, Radio Free Asia, all these State Department connected institutions. So, and then they'll use identity politics and say, shut up about my country. You're not even from there. You're not from Ukraine. We have had some of the most disgusting, like, idiotic people attacking our Twitter recently, because a bunch of our videos about Ukraine just went mega viral. So they had a collective meltdown about people finding out the truth about their Nazi war effort. So do you want to play another clip? Scott sent us a handful of choice clips from this Tim Dillon video. Do you want to watch a couple more of them? They're like 50 seconds.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
But I obviously support
the Nazis in the Ukraine.
No, not there's bad people everywhere. We don't support that, but we support.
But those are the people fighting the war in the Ukraine.
Not all.
And a lot of their special forces are avowed neo-Nazis.
Not all.
Which is okay. Listen, let's just be honest about it.
Not all of them. A lot of them. Not all of them.
This has the energy of his Lori Lightfoot coverage.
It is. It's so funny to hear people try and walk their way around that one. So why was the Azov battalion added to their actual military? Like, when you explain that to regular people and you explain that would be like adding the KKK to the National Guard, they're like, what the hell? But then to hear these like Ukrainian nationalists try and defend it, like, no, they kicked, like the liberals will say they kicked all the neo-Nazis out of the neo-Nazi militia and political party. Like, okay, I'm sure right sector and the Azov battalion just kicked out all the neo-Nazis, even though they were founded as a neo-Nazi party. And then, some people just be like, yeah, but they're freedom fighters. Like, these are a lot of the Ukrainian nationalists attacking us on Twitter. We're like, they're freedom fighters. They were attacked. Who cares what their politics are? Like, their politics are exterminating the Russian people in eastern Ukraine, which is why they were shelling those people and blowing up their homes, which is why something needed to be done here, which is why what NATO and the U.S. have done here is terrible.
It's like the SS being like, guys, I think we have a Nazi problem here. Where'd all these Nazis come from? It's just completely absurd. And the paradox of that is that in doing historical revisionism, they're also attacking Ukraine and the real history of the Ukrainian people, which is deeply embedded with the Russian people. So it's in this historical revisionism, it's not just Russia that's demonized, but it's the real history of Ukraine that's ignored, and therefore it's the severing of the Ukrainian people from their history.
For sure.
About it, we're supporting those we like those Nazis. They're the good Nazis.
Well, it's not that we want to support Nazis. It's that, an anti-democracy enemy is invading a pro-democracy ally.
Didn't Ukraine ban a lot of the pro-Russian parties after the last election? Is that democratic? Weren't there pro-Russian parties?
They banned the Russian language. They banned the Russian language and made Stepan Bandera a national hero. And these people still want to tell you that the government wasn't anti-Russian. The government that banned them from speaking the Russian language in a country with so many ethnic Russians who speak that as their first language. And then they started shooting those people with artillery shells.
In the Ukraine
there's the
that operated and they were banned that doesn't feel like democracy to me.
The pro Russian parties were doing a lot of harm in Ukraine. Now, obviously, like I don't agree with that. I'm not here to be a spokesman.
But this
for
idea,
Ukraine,
if we want to,
but I obviously support.
the
I'm not here to be a spokesman for Ukraine. No, you're not, bro. That's a good point. That's true. You're here to be a spokesman for NATO and the U.S. empire who are pushing Ukrainians towards their death. You are here to argue for the destruction of Ukraine and their people and their children and their industry, which at first Russia wasn't bombing, but as the war escalated and as the U.S. continued to push things, Russia said, okay, we're going to start destroying your industry. And now we've had months and months of that. Like the country of Ukraine is getting freaking destroyed because of people like this. Or people like this are justifying it at least. Got one more 60-second clip. I got a couple clips here.
I gotta say, I'm surprised that this is the position that Tim Dillon has. I'm all for it, man, because he's got a massive audience, and it's scary. We're literally being tiptoed into nuclear Armageddon, and no one seems to be sensible enough to give a shit in the mainstream politics or even mainstream discourse. And it's just great to have voices like Dylan that can say the truth to such a large platform, because the truth is that I consider Marxism-Leninism to be absolutely true, and the analysis that it provides of society to be absolutely true. But there's no Marxist-Leninist channel that has anywhere near the spread and the reach of like Rogan or Dylan or like even someone like Jimmy Dore, or now the next segment, Tucker Carlson. And these are people that have, for regardless of whatever other views they have on other stuff, at least they have been sensible enough to not go with the train that's heading right into a brick wall, that's taking humanity right down a brick wall to its collective death in nuclear Armageddon. So
this is so true, and people just want to dismiss, because they hate Tucker, and rightfully so. He said a ton of terrible stuff, but and he's been a propagandist for the empire forever. But then he takes his turn and starts criticizing the war in Ukraine, and people don't even want to acknowledge it because Tucker bad. It's like there are practical implications of this. Like we need anybody who with a platform who will speak out against this. Anybody who speaks to a large number of Americans who's willing to speak out against this. Like we need that. We don't have a choice, right? We don't have the luxury to be like, well, I don't really like Tucker Carlson and Tim Dillon. Okay, don't like them. That's fine. Criticize them. But, it's good when they speak out about stuff like this. And that's, likely the reason that Fox News pushed Tucker out, because they don't want him doing that. And we'll get to that later. I want to watch one more of these clips, DNC funded lies, because I think they might talk about how these kids are indirectly funded by Biden to push this stuff on TikTok. And also, I've talked, people ask how we get banned so frequently on TikTok. A lot of the times it's DemTalk, the Democratic TikTok, like mass reporting our account and trying to get us banned. So you better believe that these NGOs or whatever, Biden connected NGOs who are funding Democratic influencers on TikTok, a lot of those same influencers are the ones reporting and trying to get Midwestern Marks banned. So suppressing any of the truth while spreading just pure nonsense. And you see when they're faced with the truth, they don't have anything, right? And this will, like, Vaush is more articulate and more arrogant than these kids. But I imagine, like, I don't even know what that guy's going to say when we debate Ukraine. What's he going to say? Like, what are you going to say to defend this bullshit?
So I think that part of what they say is that all of those narratives, like I can expect that what they're going to say is that those parties that were banned were funded by Russia. I've already seen some of their arguments, and they're just making up shit, saying that Russia's the same thing they do with like the vote to include Crimea as a part of Russia. It's a fake vote. It was all this. It was controlled by Russia, and it's baseless. There's no evidence behind it. But that's I think the route that they might take, and these kids obviously didn't. But I think someone like Vaush will probably take that route.
For sure, he will. Yeah, I was amazed. Actually, in one of his videos about us, he said Russia invaded in 2014. I was like, huh? But then the war in the Donbass is a conspiracy, right? That none of that's real. But 90% of the Crimean people voting that they wanted to join Russia, that's a Russian invasion. Voucher's very smart. So let's watch this one, and then we'll move on to our next segment.
Clear, the United States and Ukraine have reached out to Russia to have peace talks.
Yeah,
like they've tried extensively, and on your China
it's
point,
actually been reported that we've discussed.
Oh, so this is the one we already watched. So let's clip. Let's do funny last jab at neolibs.
Well, doesn't that seem fun?
It'll
with
be
a nuclear
peace.
power.
It's the way it's the way the cards fall. Like he said, Russia is
These freaking kids. These 18-year-olds just excited that they're making money by getting paid money by Joe Biden. Like, oh man, we're killing it. We're TikTok influencers. Then they get called out on their bullshit. Like, you guys are pushing for nuclear war, right? They're like, well, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I guess.
That's insane, man. There's I think it's Che, but it might be another one of the great revolutionaries. But they said that I think it was Allende actually. To be young and to not be a revolutionary is a contradiction in nature, or something like that. And I look at these kids, and it's like, the future that the youth in America faces is so futureless. It's so dark and gray. And for these idiots to be just these neoliberal hacks, I don't understand it. I don't understand how in their heart or soul, if they have one, how is it not yearning for something else, for the improvement of their people's conditions? How can you be such a fucking coward, such a piece of shit, to just go along with this narrative that's tiptoeing us to collective death? It's a war against humanity itself, not just against the Russian people, a war against humanity. How can you go along with this and sleep at night? I don't get it.
It's unreal. And this was that's why I brought up that this kid immediately, once Biden became president, he made a video defending his missile strikes against Syria and blocked me, so I couldn't call him out. Like, that was an eye-opener for me. Like, some of these people are just willing to do anything for the money, right? They'll lie us into nuclear war and then shrug their shoulders and say, that's just how the cookie crumbles. We're not being paid money by Biden. We're being paid money by our management company who gets money from Biden. They'll just lie, and just as long as they're succeeding within capitalism, which a lot of kids this age view becoming an influencer, becoming popular on social media, building your profile as success, they'll say whatever they have to do to claw their way to the top. And they'll throw away whatever principles they might have had.
Invading a democratic state at the end of the day. What do you want us to do? Just not involve ourselves? We did that once, in the 40s, and then, Germany was on the beaches of Dunkirk, right? So we just have to make a decision.
Listen, in the very beginning, we did involve ourselves. We did a lot of things. We did sanctions.
Did you have something to say about that, Carlos? So
it's just this comparing Russia to Germany. Guys, come on, man. The people fighting, the people that have swastikas, skulls, SS symbols, and other Nazi insignia, those people are the Nazis. But the people with the swastikas, with tattoos all over their body, with fucking Hitler tattoos, those people are sensible liberals. They're for freedom. They're for democracy. These people will sell their mother into fucking slavery for a few dollars. There's no principle, no spine, not an ounce of what makes a human a good human being in any of these fucking scum.
This, we did that. Right. What we are now doing is we're now essentially fighting a proxy war. If NATO it's NATO weaponry that the Ukrainians are fighting, it gets very murky as to whether Russia and NATO are fighting a war. And so to me, I will drop both of you.
And leaked Pentagon documents just showed U.S. Special Forces, is French, UK, NATO Special Forces are actually in Ukraine fighting the war.
You off in Poland. I will drop both of you off in Poland, and you can go and yell and yell
right.
into your phones and be like, Vladimir Putin, I'm here with the Nazis in the Ukraine, and you better watch out because we're about to fuck you up. Gen Z doesn't care. That's why we're here in Kyiv. And you could do things with Zelensky.
Yeah.
I actually like both of you. I disagree with you.
And then-
Doesn't that seem
and then
fun?
it'll
With
be
a nuclear
peace.
power.
I don't know why he likes them. I've known that kid, I wouldn't say personally, but I've been on the TikTok sphere with him forever. And, you know, of all the Democratic shills pretending to be progressives, he is one of the worst. Like I said, as soon as Biden became president, he came out and made a video defending Biden missile striking Syria. So he won't even, say, yeah, that was bad, but, we need to vote for the lesser of two evils, which is the position a lot of millennials and Gen Z take on TikTok. It's no, Biden is literally doing good things by murdering civilians with missiles for the profit of multinationals. Thank you so much, Sam Dixon, for the super chat. Consistent supporter and YouTube member. I've seen that video about Marxism, Leninism not being real. I will definitely do my homework and be ready to destroy Bush. Thank you, though. Do you have anything else to add on that video, Carlos, or anything about Sam's super chat?
Oh, thank you, Sam. He's been very active in the streams I've been doing the last couple of days. And thank you so much for your financial support, man. You guys don't know how important this is, your support is for the Institute. The Institute is, the way we think about it, it's not just the people contributing, it's also the people that allow us to have a platform where we're contributing to other people, so the people reading our website, viewing us, supporting us financially or otherwise, I consider all of that a part of the Institute as well. It's a collective project, and you guys are as much Midwestern Marxists as Eddie, I, and others.
Couldn't agree more. And I mean, that's been obvious today, where we have like a FedEx worker and Cade Grenade, and also a financial supporter and Matthew Smith, UPS worker and financial supporter, asking for help with, their organizing efforts. Like, you guys are on the ground doing the work, and we want to forge as much connection with, real working class people as we can. And by supporting our project and working together with our project, you are literally part of our project. You are the reason we can do this. And we're also talking about right to work laws later. And like, that's part of the reason I lost my job this year, at least the reason I couldn't do anything about it, right? I talked to some lawyers. They're like, right to work state, dude. They can fire you for chewing bubble gum if they want to. So it's disgusting. But but I mean, our YouTube and all of our content has blown up since that happened even more. And that's all because of you guys. You guys were the reason I was able to compete in Vegas this weekend. So thank you for that. Which I forgot to talk about, by the way, like the casinos in Vegas. This might be a good transition to our next segment. They made me so sad. Like, I didn't want to gamble because people donated money for me to be there. So I didn't want to spend Midwestern Marks donations on casino gambling. So I would just sit back and watch, dude. I would watch as people would go $100 bill. And then 5 minutes later, all their money was gone. $100 bill. 5 minutes later, it's gone. $100 bill. Ooh, they won one. They won $70. $100 bill. The $70 is gone and their $100 bill is gone. Like, the way those casinos suck money out of people. And realize too, they're not just designed, like, they are designed to get people addicted because they let you win a few times without ever beating the house. And obviously the casinos are extremely wealthy. Like, everyone thinks that they're winning, when in reality they're not, nobody is. But it's also like a social thing. Like, you can sit at a roulette table and socialize with people, and then you don't want to leave. And then people are convincing you, no, throw more money, stay here, hang out. So it's like a part of our culture. And this idea that you're supposed to go to Vegas when you want to have fun, when you want to relax, and just hand over your money to the casinos, built by the mob, using the pensions of Hoover Dam workers after the Cuban Revolution, kicked the casinos and the mobsters out of Cuba. And that's like, it's disgusting, dude. Vegas disgusts me. I'm sorry. Like, that is a terrible culture. It is a perfect example of consumerism and capitalism and commodity fetishism. And relations between people becoming relations between things, to where people think, the only kind of social connection they have is when they go dump $200 of their paycheck in at a roulette table.
That's wonderfully said. I don't know if I can add anything, but yeah, I remember one of the first movies that really put like casino life as the sort of, and Vegas specifically as a sort of pinnacle of like what adult fun is, was The Hangover. And it's so extremely embedded in our culture, and there's a social element to it that increases the likelihood of someone staying at the table and continuing to gamble. There's also just the consumption of alcohol, right, which shapes your decisions, and it doesn't make you any wiser with the decisions that you're about to take after a few drinks. So there's so many factors, and it's all designed to suck out the little bit of money that working people have been able to save over God knows how long.
Right. Someone says, "Do you see any high rollers during your visit?" There are some people shelling out insane amounts of cash. I don't know who they were. There's a lot of wrestlers in there, obviously. But it was insane to see how much money some of them spent at the casino. And then Cobra Commander, the worst is the porn everywhere and trash flyers. Yeah, it's insane. I remember going to Vegas for a doctor's appointment with my dad when I was in middle school, and we were like excited, see the city that was so famous and that we had heard so much about, and we were just grossed out and uncomfortable and anxious there. My dad's like, "How can people bring their kids here?" Like, obviously it's supposed to be adult fun, but like there was nothing really to do. There was one roller coaster that I did, the New York roller coaster, but really it's just like degeneracy, debauchery. It's just pornography and alcohol and these things that feel good for a second, but then they destroy your health, your mental health, your physical health, your financial health. Is really what Vegas is. Come enjoy, a few days or a week of debauchery and leave poor and feeling like crap. So yeah, and I see why Cuba kicked all the casinos and the brothels and the things like that out of Havana after the revolution. Why would you want a culture like that? Why would you want a society like that where the working people think that that's what's fun? And like I sat next to this couple on the plane going to Vegas for a vacation. Like I feel bad for them, but they were miserable. They were miserable. They were complaining about everything. Everyone was the worst person ever, and everyone was against them, and they were in a hurry to do everything. And like I was cutting 25 pounds on the plane, and I was way more happy than them. Just it was like, is this really making you happy? The gambling and the debauchery, is it really making you happy, or is it just sad? And to me, it's just sad. But yeah, that's what I think every time I go to Vegas. I really wish USA Wrestling would hold the tournament somewhere else, but they have a partnership with the South Point Hotel, and they make a whole lot of money off it. So,
But you seem to have been capable of bringing out these contradictions in the minds of the wrestlers you were with, right? So, can you tell us a little bit about some of that success in convincing people in the heart of the most grotesque form of American capitalism, how you were able to convince people that socialism might be the answer?
yeah, I mean, like people agreed with me, and I one of my best friends was there with me, and he's really into health and fitness, or a couple of them, and I kind of made the same arguments that I've been making, but really just talked about, like, we went and saw the Hoover Dam. And we went to the Hoover Dam Museum and learned about how it was the biggest government contract ever, and they had to bring 6 different companies together to build it. And I was explaining to the athletes and the coaches, like, the government needed to do this because it wouldn't be profitable for any company, despite the fact that the Hoover Dam brings power to so many houses, so many public firms, so many private firms in the area. Its use value is extremely high in terms of what it brings to people. But the government needed to bring together a coalition of different companies and pay them basically to do it. So it's essentially a form of central economic planning. The government said we need something to combat the Great Depression and create a bunch of jobs, and that's what they went ahead and did. And you wouldn't have engineering marvel like that under capitalism. The market system doesn't build things like that. The market system doesn't care about electrifying people's homes and stuff. And I was just pointing this out to the athletes and the coaches, and they loved it. And I mean, then me and the other coaches were drinking one night. Obviously, the athletes weren't there for this, but I got them on board with a socialist revolution in like a half an hour of talking about it. being like a lot of these culture war social issues are intended to divide us, right? And this one coach kept saying we need a party based on economics, and they were all on board with socialism. They were just like, how do we get there? How do we do it? And I'm like, well, the people who own everything, the Bill Gates and them, like, they're just people, right? They have all this ownership, but it's an ownership that we have to agree to, right? Like if we had a party that was also made up of huge chunks of the military and disaffected veterans, and we seized that wealth, there'd be nothing that they could do to stop us. And they were 100% on board with it. And you could have called them communists or socialists by the time we left Vegas. I mean, it was just, but everything I was pointing out was so obvious, especially in Vegas, especially talking about the Cuban history and the history of these casinos and how they stole the workers' pensions to build the casinos and super exploit the workers. Like, it's just obvious when you take a class-based approach. And then I think it was an infrared person on Twitter, and like I have my critiques of infrared, my areas where I think they're good, but a lot of the time I think they just end up being mirrors of wokeism. They end up just engaging in culture war nonsense instead of focusing on class. And this guy was saying that you'll never win people over only talking about class. You need to engage in the culture war. And I'm like, bro, I just got back from Las Vegas where I convinced 20 people who thought communism was evil when we went to Vegas to be communists by talking about class. Like if we just had a party that was entirely focused on class, I think it would be so easy to show people that what's in their own interest. And yeah, that's that story, which was interesting. And I also want to comment on what Donovan said here. Even sadder, observing the workers. The workers at this casino had to wear thongs. They had to wear thongs and like spandex, like see-through spandex. So they're just walking around. You could see their butts the whole time. And anything I bought from those waitresses, I would tip them so well. I would talk to them, and you could tell they're just used to creepy old men, getting hammered and touching them. And I just felt so bad for them, like that they're being objectified in that way by this casino corporation, having to walk around in thongs all day. And dude, they look so miserable. So I was trying to talk to them and smile at them, and they were so not used to it. It was making them uncomfortable, almost like I think they liked it, but they were just not used to having people interact with them that way, because they're literally, the casino sees them as objects, walking around in thongs, serving people drinks.
It's incredible the psychological effect that it has on human beings, and it's so extremely dehumanizing. And it's something that specifically in that sexualized form, it's been primarily an experience of the female part of the working class, and those are specific ways in which exploitation and various forms of specific forms of oppression come together and just make these very nefarious sights to see. And it's stomach turning how disgusting it is, and yeah, especially with I can imagine like the old guys drinking and just getting rowdy. And they have to do it to survive, which fucking blows. But
yeah, and I watched the old wrestling coaches who, like, a lot of them I used to respect, kind of engaging in this. And I'm like, how can you do that, dude?
right.
How can you do that? Like, you have daughters, right? How can you see these women walking around in thongs and serving the casinos because they need it to survive, and engage in that and think it's awesome? Like, it makes me so sad. Or they blame the women. Look how gross they are. They're putting themselves in that situation. Like, maybe what else do you do if you're a decently attractive young girl in Vegas, though? It's probably the best way that they have to put food on the table for their kids. So, yeah. Is there still an alarming amount of water loss at Lake Mead? There is. I think they've started filling it up in 2022. They tried to fill it up. It did look, there was a lot of water still there when I was looking at it, but one of the major lakes near Vegas dried up because of Vegas and the water consumption. And yeah, there's just a lot of water waste everywhere where you look in Vegas. And I mean, I don't know. It's still cool to see the water shows and stuff, but it's also like not the greatest use of limited water resources. But yeah, Lake Mead is where the Hoover Dam is connected to. It's a man-made lake, technically, but it was interesting to read about it. And they didn't talk about water loss. I think they're probably trying to cover that up and not put that at the forefront of people's minds. But the Hoover Dam is amazing. I took about 15 minutes of videos and a bunch of pictures. So I plan to do a bunch of TikToks about it and about the history and, essentially how it's a form of economic central planning that brought electricity. I also told all the wrestling athletes about the Aswan Dam in Egypt and Nasser, who nationalized or who built this nationalized dam that basically electrified the whole country. Like, imagine if we had that in the US. Like, yeah. And then I got them on board with trains. But it was so interesting to see how everyone is on board with working class policies, pro working class policies. Unless you're a friggin' bajillionaire, everybody was on board with it, which is why we need a class-based movement. And these people telling us that, fighting only or making class the thrust of our focus, that is the way to go. People telling you that's not the way to go, I disagree with strongly.
Right, and it just reminds me of this famous quote from Marx, which is that capitalism destroys its two sources of wealth: working people and nature. And that's what's been done to Lake Mead and to the workers you saw in the casinos, and to the ones that have foolishly been led to believe, thanks to the culture they've been thrown into, that fun means spending the little bit of dimes that they've been able to save up in those casinos.
Right. And thankfully, me and my buddies, through wrestling and through other means, have been able to see through that and get past that. And we realize that that's not happiness, and that health and social connection and things like that bring you happiness. And I mean, we were just disgusted with it by the time we left. Like, you engage in it a little bit, you enjoy the city. You try not to just be bitter by the whole time. But that was me by the end. All right. I got there. I'm like, all right, I'm going to enjoy Vegas. I'm just going to accept it for what it is. And by the end, just walking around the casino like, this fucking bullshit. I'm gonna burn this place down. I hate this shit. Got a whole bunch of super chats. Justin Lips Watson, thank you so much. Have receipts ready for debate lying and is his game plan. You bet I will have plenty of receipts ready for Voosh. Thankfully, I've been following the Ukraine issue for forever now, so I should be good there as long as I make a whole list of sources. How about free neighborhood? Thank you for the $5 super chat, GQ. How about free neighborhood cafeterias in cities where you get 3 meals a day, good quality, a lot more efficient than everyone having their own kitchen? I like it. Yeah. One of our professors who writes for our website now is real big on that, like community food service. And he would tell, like, the CAF at our college, I guess it's like wasted not a lot of food and didn't use a lot of energy to cook the food in giant batches. It saves a whole ton of energy. So, and that would be a great way to do like the Black Panthers breakfast programs and bring food to areas that need it. So I think that could be an option post-socialism, of course, or it could be an option for community organizing, for mutual aid. Set up events where you're basically doing a cafeteria in cities and bringing people high quality food.
I'm doing a fast, so just thinking about the school food is getting me hungry. But it would also be able to encourage a lot more sociability in the act of eating. And it would also allow people to have more time because they wouldn't be like having to cook. And that's usually something that leads people into eating unhealthy and like TD dinners and stuff, because a good meal would take, an hour at least to prepare.
Absolutely. And workers in the Soviet Union ate as many calories as the US, but had healthier portions and healthier food in general. Choo-choo donation train time. And Molly sends a train. Thank you so much, Sam Dixon and Molly McGuire. Midwestern Marxists, consistent supporters.
Thank you, comrades.
Yeah, appreciate it so much. SM7 baller. Irish elites pushing NATO membership. Scary stuff. That is scary stuff. Similar to like Denmark and the Scandinavian countries. The Scandinavian countries who are supposed to be neutral or whatever, like Switzerland, pushing for NATO membership. Very scary to see them lining up on the side of the U.S. In this sort of global conflict and the move to multipolarity. So, yeah, let's hope the people of Ireland aren't about that. Some of those Irish politicians who always go viral, I think Mick Wallace is one of them, but they've been some of the main people calling it out and calling out NATO's BS. So hopefully that argument is able to win out in Ireland.
Claire Daly has been, or Daly, she's been another awesome voice, and they're just spitting on the legacy of James Connolly and the Irish nationalist revolutionaries. It's disgusting.
It is. And last one here from Andrew Ray. Thank you. Eddie, you've experienced a taste of what Havana looked like prior to the revolution. Viva la revolucion. Exactly. Yeah. And people will argue Cuba was rich before the revolution. Look at Havana. Like, no, it was a bunch of Cuban women being forced into prostitution and having to do those jobs at the casinos, while Western multinationals used Cuba as a playground, as a place where they could go and just cheat on their wives and be the worst people imaginable. Until the communist revolution kicked them out. And then Epstein's Island isn't too far from Cuba either. I guess that's where they decided, the other place where they decided to go. But the idea that Cuba getting rid of the casinos and sometimes you'll see it portrayed, and even Sartre a little bit, you'll see people portray Havana as like, oh, it was this authoritarian militaristic place, whereas it used to be a playground. Like, it it was a more organized place. It was a place with economic development. Yes, there was probably more military there, but they had to kick out all these mobsters, all these casino owners, all these terrible people profiting off of prostitution and profiting off the worst stuff imaginable. So to argue that Cuba's, a worse place after the revolution because they don't have as many brothels is a really strange and kind of gross argument to make.
They used to call it Sin City. There was someone in the chat that put Vice City, but they used to call it Sin City precisely because of that. It was so extremely bad, and it was only a very small percentage of mostly white Cubans, and the ones that were not white were like artists who actually lived somewhat, livable lives in that condition. The vast majority of people were just in horrendous poverty and semi-slave conditions, and the thing that they used to say was that we won the war against the Spanish just to be recolonized by the Americans.
For sure. Sorry, I'm trying to block this annoying guy who said we can't afford a library card. That's actually kind of a funny joke. I guess we'll put them in a timeout for now. That's always funny when someone comes into the stream just to hate on us. And then you put them in a timeout and they wait there for 5-10 minutes and then they come back and keep talking shit again. Like, you hate us so much. You're spending your whole night watching us talk and listening to us. So you can send hate comments. Like, please go outside. Find a hobby. Make yourself happy. Another super chat here from Avi, AVI, or Sameo Black. Try this way. Could ally with the Panthers in the Second Rainbow Coalition. Now I'd be happy to make that alliance happen. Yes, that's what we need. Is like another rainbow coalition, another coalition that's not afraid to bring people together despite their differences. And I think that's, ultimately what Carlos argues for in the purity fetish, is, a coalition of anti-imperialist, socialist, pro-working class forces, despite disagreements that we may have on cultural issues, social issues, issues that aren't related to the primary contradiction of the contradiction between capital and labor, which leads to the, imperialism and all these things that we see in modern day capitalism, neoliberal capitalism.
And I just want to say that the black militant organizations have been also at the forefront in the U.S. of fighting against this proxy war against Russia, and even to some extent defending the geopolitically and historically progressive role that Russia is playing. The people from the African People's Socialist Party. I believe the leader's name was Omali Yeshitela. He just got indicted, and 3 other people from his party got indicted for being against NATO and the U.S.'s proxy war against Russia, and it's completely despicable. And we've tried to show solidarity in any way possible. Hopefully, we can within the next few days contact someone from their organization and see what's going on and see if we can get an interview or something. But it's very sad to see, and it's embedded in the legacy of the twin evils, as Henry Winston would call it, of racism and anti-communism. And the one person in mainstream media who brought that up and said, regardless of how much I disagree with them, it's messed up that this was done to them, got fired the day after he did that. So
exactly. How dare you say that, though? How dare you support Tucker Carlson, you fascist pig?
The last people that got indicted in that way were Du Bois and Robeson, and it was in 51. So, I mean, this racism goes hand in hand with anti-communism. That's right. When you see these people claiming themselves to be, anti-racist or whatever, and they're holding on to anti-communism, look wary, not just of their politics, but of their commitment to black liberation. Because, you can't have in the U.S. racism without anti-communism and anti-communism without racism.
Absolutely. And I mean, a perfect historical example of that is the Paul Robeson HUAC testimony, which you can see on YouTube. It's just like insane how these U.S. government officials are blatantly racist, blatantly anti-communist towards them in a country that's supposed to be based on freedom of speech and freedom of political expression. And he points that out, and they still just attack him for his race and for being part of the Communist Party. And now, like, we think that this couldn't happen today, but what's happening to the Ruhu movement? It's the same thing, except we're probably never going to get a video of the trial. It's going to be more secretive. They're going to try and, I don't know, put them away. At the same time that they're prosecuting Julian Assange and other whistleblowers under the Espionage Act is just full dictatorship, full authoritarianism, which is funny because the U.S. always tells us we have to invade, or the government always tells us we have to invade other countries because they're authoritarian, as they silence dissent here at home. But yeah, do you have anything else you want to touch on before we jump into the Russell Brand video about Tucker Carlson? I think this will be a good transition because we just talked about Tucker being the only voice in the mainstream cable media who called out, who was critical of the war in Ukraine, critical of certain bajillionaires like Jeff Bezos and such, and who supported the Ruhu socialist movement being prosecuted by the State Department or by the legal system for being anti-proxy war in Ukraine.
No, nothing else to say. I'm excited to watch the video and to listen to Russell Brand's very enjoyable to hear accent.
Absolutely. He's a great speaker. Some people I said that Russell Brand's where I get a lot of my news from just because he's interesting to listen to. And there were a couple of people, mostly just like liberals who already hate us, but who were like mocking us for that. I'm like, what's wrong with Russell Brand? There's a reason he's got 5 million subscribers on YouTube now. And like, I like listening to his accent. It's a good accent.
People on the left hate anyone who is imperfect and has an audience. What they love is the people that never grow that big. They want a left that continues to fail, continues to stay small enough and irrelevant so that it can perpetuate and proliferate its identity as a countercultural fringe group. And that's just absurd, right? To get power, you have to engage with the mass of people, and that means working on the ground and working with people like this that have an audience of, I think, 6, 7, 8, 10 million people. Come on, guys. We have to win. If we want to win, we have to do these sorts of things, not just ignore audiences that are massive, that can get us access to millions of ears because the person isn't perfect in various areas.
Right. And I mean, this is not everybody's a content creator, but everyone is an organizer. And like, the more you tailor your message and everything you're doing to like the leftists who will try and cancel you for watching a Russell Brand video or whatever, like the less popular you'll get. And we've realized this with our project. There was a time when anytime we got attacked by a lot of people, we'd be like, oh, we better walk it back and delete it. And, we learned pretty quickly, like, no, like, say what you believe, say what you think, and, be willing to change your mind and engage with opposite arguments, but don't pull it back just because people are getting mad at you. Because a lot of the times, what's popular is hated by what you said, the sort of countercultural fringe leftist social group.
Tucker Carlson.
So this is Russell Brand on Tucker Carlson.
Has broken his silence, and the Pentagon and Department of Defense are cheering his departure.
The Pentagon.
Is it good that the mainstream media has cleansed itself of an anti-war voice? Where will opposition to mainstream objectives come from now? Hello there, you 6.4 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage to truth and freedom. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel right now. It's the only way we can ensure that we will remain in direct contact with you. We're going to be having a look at Tucker Carlson's video response to the events around Fox News and his departure, focusing in particular on the anti-war rhetoric that Tucker Carlson regularly deployed. Now, of course, a lot of people on the left, center left, I'd call them the neoliberal establishment, are attacking Tucker Carlson. But where else are anti-war voices going to come from? Why did Fox News get rid of Tucker Carlson? Where will Tucker Carlson go to next? And where does radical opposition to the establishment agenda come from if anybody who speaks out against the agenda is one way or another cleansed from the system? Did you see the White House press dinner? What a cozy little jamboree with Joe Biden joking about the free press and how the press and the establishment have to work together. You better believe they work together.
The free press is a pillar, maybe the pillar of free society.
How can you have an establishment and press working together to keep ordinary people ignorant and bewildered and claim that it's anything like a free country with free comms? Voices that attack the establishment, that attack the deep state, that attack the corporatization of America and indeed the world are necessary at this time. That's why Julian Assange is in prison. That's why Edward Snowden's in Russia. And that's why Tucker Carlson's no longer on Fox News, even though I disagree with Tucker Carlson about a bunch of stuff. Let's have a
And yeah, I already see people pointing out where Tucker is wrong, including in modern issues with his hatred of China. And yeah, totally agree. Couldn't agree more. Like, his anti-China rhetoric is really harmful. He helped lie us into the Iraq war. He's admitted that. You know, he said that recently on a podcast. You know, nobody's saying absolve Tucker Carlson. Nobody except Glenn Greenwald is saying Tucker's a socialist. Glenn did say that once, and I made a video criticizing him for it and saying how ridiculous that is. But he is the only one who dares to say anything anti-war, anything against the war effort in Ukraine on mainstream media. And that's why they pushed him out. It has to be why they pushed him out. Like, there are people trying to point to all these other reasons, and, you know, it amounts to Tucker Carlson's no longer profitable for them. Like, guys, that is crazy. That's like, Fox News has lost all this money since they got rid of him. But I was saying that before that even happened. Like, guys, he's the most viewed news show on cable media because he's willing to say the truth sometimes, right? Despite all of his anti-China rhetoric. So the idea that Fox News just got rid of him, got rid of their most popular show because it's not profitable, that doesn't make any sense. But that's what people are probably still arguing in our TikTok comments right now. But
Right. And I mean, we're seeing it in the chat. And I mean, I think it's worth reminding people, like, the areas where Tucker Carlson is despicable, trying to, you know, immigrants, certain stuff with women and workers' rights, and but we got to be honest with ourselves. He didn't get fired for racist comments against immigrants. He didn't get fired for comments on women's issues or on labor issues. He didn't get fired for being, you know, a war hawk for the war against China. He didn't get fired for lying us into the Iraq war. He didn't get fired for any of these fucking things. He got fired for being, for some reason, the one person that was allowed to, for some period of time, tell the truth about the proxy war against Russia that's leading humanity to nuclear Armageddon. The one person that has allowed people like Aaron Mate, like Jimmy Dore, like Chris Smalls, one of the most exciting new labor leaders that was just in Cuba yesterday with President Diaz-Canel, that just spoke out the days before he got fired against the indictment of the leaders of the Uhuru movement, Omali Yeshitela and the other people from the African People's Socialist Party. That is why he got fired, because in those areas, he threatened the established narrative of empire. Guys, we need to be capable of understanding the objective contradictions that are in reality. The fact that someone can both be an asshole in 90% of areas and in 10% of areas that are fundamental, that are very much related to the principal contradiction in society. If they're good, you know, we have to say that. Martí used to have this phrase, Jose Martí, the apostle of the Cuban Revolution, that, you know, there's people that look at the sun and talk about talk about its spots and the fact that it burns, and then, ignore the fact that it also provides light. And the essence of the quote was that, we have to look at things objectively, at least see the objective contradictions inherent in them, not ignore the good to highlight the bad, not ignore the bad to highlight the good. See how it is that it's heterogeneous and not just one thing or the other. And that's the case with Tucker. Yeah, sure, it's mostly bad, but he's good in an area that's very fundamental. And a lot of other people that claim themselves to be good in those other areas in which Tucker Carlson is bad are now voting in favor of funding Nazis in Ukraine, like people like Bernie Sanders, like AOC, and all the other progressives in the squad that voted in favor of illegalizing the rail workers' strike and have just become pure shills of the neoliberal imperialist establishment, while Tucker Carlson, at least in this area, has not. And I know he's very anti-China, but when he had Jimmy Dore on, he let him at least tell the millions of Americans, because he has, as you mentioned, Eddie, the most watched show on cable news, or had. He allowed Jimmy Dore to tell millions of Americans that their real enemy is not China, and to show them and argue in a very successful manner for why that's the case. What other cable news show does that? No other one. No other cable news show does that. And that's why he got fired. So, I mean, like Ben Norton, he was tweeting out all the bad stuff that Tucker's done. Yes, he's a piece of shit. But he didn't get fired for being a piece of shit. He got fired for being right in an issue that is of substance for empire right now.
Absolutely. And you need to recognize that. Like, you need to recognize objective reality, and be an adult and realize that even people you don't like can say the truth sometimes. And that matters if they're the most viewed public news show the most viewed news show in the country. And I really like this from Cobra Commander. It no longer matters what is said, only who says it. That's exactly it. And that's like the liberal mode of thought. It doesn't matter what's being said. It matters who's saying it and whether or not, they're on my good side or my bad side. And that's not a dialectical way to think. That's not a way to interpret reality. That's just a way to have cliques and hate certain people, which, you can go ahead, hate Tucker Carlson, like we said. And, nobody's saying what Ben Norton said about Tucker Carlson is false. We're just saying it's not very useful analysis when it comes to how he got fired or why he got fired, which is, of course, because he was critical of the war effort. And we'll see. It'll be interesting to see once Tucker starts his own podcast or something, which I'm sure will be extremely popular, where he goes with these positions, where he takes these. This killed me. I wish I could find this tweet. Reminds me of that tweet from a conservative going, Tucker Carlson may have been a socialist, but he spoke the truth. I wish I could find that tweet. Oh, it's so funny. And thank you, Estarbach. Redacted, run by Clayton and Natalie Morris, is also a great alternative media available on YouTube. Solidarity comments. Thank you, Estarbach. Solidarity with you as well. Check out Redacted, everyone. Yeah, that used to be Lee Camp's show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think Lee Camp now is with Mint Press.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Love the boys over at Mint Press, boys and girls. Yeah. Anything else, or should I jump back in?
No, let's jump back in.
But look at his video.
One of the first things you realize when you step outside the noise for a few days is how many genuinely nice people there are in this country. Kind and decent people who really care about what's true, and a bunch of hilarious people also. A lot of those. It's got to be the majority of the population, even now. So that's heartening.
One of the things that I like about Tucker Carlson is he's a kind of frequency jam. The way he has those conversations with political figures where he's like, oh, okay, oh, all right. He's a difficult person to contend with, I imagine. And one of the things that surprises me is that people that oppose Tucker on cultural issues aren't willing to see that when it comes to things like the criticism of the war, their willingness to attack the establishment, the critiques of the military-industrial complex, the ongoing attacks of the deep state, that these are exactly the arguments of what was once known as the radical left just 20 years ago. Cast your mind back to the late 60s or the early 70s, the countercultural movement, the civil rights movement, Black Panthers, women's movement. You wouldn't find the radical left on the same side as like the Department of Defense and the CIA going, we've got to get rid of that guy. The attacks on radical anti-establishment voices often use the technique of saying, oh, you're far right now. But if we are far right for agreeing that the establishment needs to be took to task, then what have they become if they're on the same side as the Department of Defense or the Pentagon or the world's biggest corporation? What's happened to them?
The other thing you notice when you take a little time off is how unbelievably stupid most of the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember that we had them. Trust me, as someone who's participated.
So it seems to be that Tucker Carlson primarily is attacking the mainstream media and obviously in particular his former employers, Fox. Those of us that were observing Tucker Carlson personally felt that he was getting disillusioned with the limitations of operating within a mainstream space. And it's interesting to observe, isn't it? And let me know what you think in the chat and the comments, that if you go on the TV and attack the war machine, attack the deep state, attack the mainstream media, attack the two-party system, that in the end you will be excluded. It makes you wonder how much control Rupert Murdoch has over Fox and how much it is a reflection of his own ideology. I used to think, well, maybe they don't care what anyone says as long as it's generating views and revenue and money and power. Like having me on there, it's like they don't care if I'm anti-establishment. They just think, who gives a shit what that little limey's saying? But now I'm starting to think, oh wow, there's the potential that voices like ours, voices like yours, can really make a difference.
And yet at the same time, and this is the amazing thing, the undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources.
I would say that those are very important subjects, perhaps the most important subject. Demographic change is, of course, the subject that people say suggests that Tucker Carlson is talking about race and the balance between different races in America and stuff like that. Personally, I feel that alliances between cultural groups that are not operating in the top tiers of the establishment is an absolute priority. And I wouldn't participate in the promotion of any ideas that turn people of different cultures, colors, races, ideologies against one another. Me personally, that's not the way to go.
Russell Brand's purity fetish and the crisis of Western Marxism. Got to bring different groups together to fight a class war. I mean, I think Russell Brand, he used to self-describe as a communist and socialist, and this is why I like his show, man. Like, this rhetoric is great. I love this, and I also love how he points to the audience, like you can make a difference. He like helps people feel empowered. One of our buddies, Brock, who's a communist, worked on the Bernie campaign with us and was disaffected by the Democratic Party and is now, communist socialist, runs the local homeless shelter. He read Russell Brand's book and came away really, really inspired from it. Brock's someone who can read anything. He's read Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, and he'll quote it and be like, no, these certain rules are good. There's good self-help advice in there. But a lot of people are looking for like that sort of self-help type stuff and that empowerment, and that's what Russell Brand is good at giving people. But
those memes where it's like Karl Marx writing Capital, and then Dolly Parton's 9 to 5, and he's just like plagiarizing. That's that's what Russell Brand did with me. He just spoke into my ear, and I wrote the purity fetish. No, but it's he's right. This is how we should be approaching the issues, and at its core, it's being able to think dialectically. He probably doesn't know he's thinking dialectically. There's this famous quote from Engels where he says that men have long been thinking dialectically before they knew that they were thinking dialectically and what it was that they were doing. And that's what Russell Brand is doing. He's able to suss out a situation concretely and see the objective contradictions at play, the movements that are taking place, the interconnections of various things, and produce a narrative that has an eye towards the social totality and how it is that these particular instances threaten the social totality and the narratives of the establishment. And I'm all for it. It's obviously not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It's a really good point for millions of people in his audience to hear.
For sure.
go. But when it comes to the debate around war, when have you seen in the mainstream media a reasoned debate about trying to pursue a diplomatic solution?
Debates like that are not permitted in American media. Both political parties and their donors have reached consensus on what benefits them, and they actively collude to shut down any conversation about it. Suddenly, the United States looks very much like a one-party state.
That's exactly what Noam Chomsky is saying as well, that there is more censorship in your country, America, than there is in Russia. Noam Chomsky, about as far left as...
I actually got my wrestling buddies on board with a one-party state this week. I was like, he's like, oh, the two-party system sucks. And I'm like, yeah, we should just have one party, a workers' party with different ideological strains and different leaders. Like, yeah.
I'm all for it, man.
Yeah. You can have, you don't need a million parties, but one workers' party with a bunch of ideological strains, so you have a dictatorship of the workers, the proletariat, but, then within that, ideas are debated, discussed, just like, China under Mao. There were people from the beginning who wanted to do more of a reform and opening up new economic policy type deal. And then there were more people who wanted a more top-down, centrally planned economy. And they debated and, ultimately they went with the more centrally planned economy, but then that laid the basis for the later reform and opening up. So you can have different ideological strains within the one workers' party, but we don't have that. We have two bourgeois parties, which ends up being, essentially one party, but they diverge on cultural issues. And, and then when Liz Cheney and these horrible war hawks find it convenient to switch parties, they will. They'll switch to whatever party is pro-military industrial complex.
It's possible to go without it becoming, I don't know, it's not an angle anymore. You'd go back round to the right, which is what a lot of people are saying, obviously. Let me know in the chat and the comments if you think that Tucker and Chomsky are right.
That's a depressing realization, but it's not permanent. Our current orthodoxies won't last. They're brain dead. Nobody actually believes them. Hardly anyone's life is improved by them.
If you look at...
That is such a good point. That is such a good point that nobody even believes this. And that's why I was able to convince all these wrestlers that we need a one-party state, because everybody knows. Everybody knows the Democrats and Republicans are corrupt and that they serve Wall Street. Everybody knows, right? All they need is a strategy or a path forward to change it, and they'll get on board. But
Right. And it's so easy to distinguish the truth from what's false because specifically with the case of Ukraine, the same people that today say that you're a Putin apologist if you talk about the Nazism and fascism in Ukraine were writing about it in 2014 and 2015 before they had to be just full-blown kiss-ass and drums of war for empire in these proxy war. So it's very easy once you understand even a little bit of the context to see through the bullshit narrative that they're painting.
absolutely, yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Where Pilgrim mentioned something that I was noticing. Tucker looks like he's in a sauna. He's like wearing a suit in a sauna. It's a weird vibe
He
coming
does.
out.
Maybe he was in Vegas cutting weight with me this week. I
That's
spent
what
a
it
lot
was.
of time in a sauna.
I mean, have you ever seen Eddie and Tucker in the same room? I don't think so.
Oh, no wonder I've been defending Tucker on TikTok. The libs were right. I am Tucker Carlson.
That's got to be the new conspiracy. There's one out there I've heard that's like a few idiots saying that we're like funded by Soros or something. Get this one going. Eddie's actually Tucker Carlson.
Yes, that's a more accurate conspiracy theory than that we're funded by Soros. Like, if you knew how poor Carlos and I were, you know how fucking stupid that is. But yeah, I'm okay with people thinking that I'm secretly Tucker. That would just be hilarious and probably help us grow our project.
Right.
Brain dead. Nobody actually believes them. Hardly anyone's life is improved by them.
If you look at that White House press conference dinner and you see Joe Biden demanding that American journalists be released from prison, while you know that Snowden is in exile in Russia, while you know that Julian Assange is rotting away in prison, essentially waiting to be exiled or executed, you know that what you're watching is theater. That Tucker Carlson is right. The orthodoxies are dead and brain dead, bereft of ideas. All they are is the advocates and managerial classes stewarding the agenda of the corporate elites. There's no original ideas coming from there. That's why they have to agitate us into a state of constant friction around cultural issues, just so that there is some febrility, just so as there's some energy around it. New ideas will come from new alliances. New ideas will come from new conversations. The old orthodoxies are indeed dead.
This moment is too inherently ridiculous to continue, and so it won't. The people in charge know this. That's why they're hysterical and aggressive. They're afraid. They've given up persuasion. They're resorting to force. But it won't work. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. At the same time, the liars who've been trying to silence them shrink, and they become weaker. That's the iron law of the universe. True things prevail. Where can you still find Americans saying true things? There aren't many places left, but there are some, and that's enough. As long as you can hear the words, there is hope. See you soon.
Let's pause there for a moment and see what these guys who keep the lights on have to say. And it's in the form of me. Hello there, you awakening one.
That was an incredibly powerful ending. I liked it, man. It's true. It's the narrative of the Enlightenment that the left has always had, and now because the left has gone woke and participated in a very tribalistic form of politics, it's rejected. But reason prevails, truth prevails, everything is in constant change, and what's going on now is not eternal. It's going to change. And Brand is absolutely correct. We're seeing a political realignment. I would have never thought that it'd be primarily the conservative part of our working class that be questioning war, and conservative pundits that be questioning war. But it is the case, and we can't ignore it. And that doesn't mean we accept everything they say, but it means that we have to move with the times and adjust our analysis with the changing of the times. And besides the most militant parts of the labor movement already, from what I've been able to see, it's the Trump part, the part of the working class that's with Trump that, at least in terms of social consciousness, is the most radical. They're questioning the establishment. They're extremely skeptical about what they call the deep state and globalism. And all these things are just central to the functionings of capitalism, and very easy to get them from those ideas and those terms to Marxist ideas. And we should organize in accordance with class, of course, but in terms of where people are right now in terms of social consciousness, I think the Trump part of the working class that sees Tucker and stuff, they're a lot more ahead than the ones that are just mainstream. Let's vote for Joe Biden every 4 years or something.
Absolutely. And I like this comment too. Tucker just described Eddie Carlson, fam. And appreciate that. Thank you. And I do agree, because what we've noticed is no matter how many times they suppress us or ban us or whatever, we just keep telling the truth, or send hate mobs after us. We just keep telling the truth, keep reading, keep researching and telling the truth. And it keeps growing. It keeps expanding. More and more people are agreeing with what we're saying, and in launching themselves down that path of self-education and educating themselves, and getting to the truth themselves. And there's always hope. The ruling class wants us to be doomers. They want to convince us that there's no hope, but people recognize that the establishment's lying to us and that they need something different. And when people recognize that on such a mass scale, there's hope, and you just have to bring those people the truth. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And the more we do that, the more class struggle is going to rage in this country. And ultimately, we'll be able to turn it into something great, a true worker state. But really, really interesting to see that was Tucker's response to getting fired there. And it'll be interesting to see what direction he goes in the future.
And he has said horrendous racist things, but and none of those are excusable, and we shouldn't forget any of those. But where have the comments from Bernie Sanders and AOC been for the indictment of the leaders of the African People's Socialist Party and the leaders of the Uhuru movement? Where have their comments been? They've been silent. And they've been silent because the same more that these black communists are fighting again and exposing and saying the truth about, that same war is being funded. They're voting for the funding of that same war. These people like AOC and Bernie, and you know, meanwhile Tucker Carlson is not only calling out the war, but allowing voices like Russell Brand, Jimmy Dore, Aaron Mate, and a bunch of others to come on and tell the truth and speaking out in favor of the African People's Socialist Party and against their indictment twice, because he did it at the last segment he did for Fox, and then he did it at the presentation that he did for the Heritage Foundation. He mentioned it twice. So I don't know what more. The facts are there. The facts speak for themselves. And if you don't think that merits an updating of what we have traditionally considered the progressive forces, I don't know what does. It shows that there's been a tremendous political realignment in the country, and the question of war, which was the question that got MLK killed, that got Malcolm X killed, that got the fiercest attacks against Paul Robeson and W.E.B. Du Bois. In the question of war, the traditional left and the progressives and the social democrats, oh boy, are they wrong? And these people from the right that are horrible and a host of other things, they're the ones that are right on the money. So I don't know what to tell you guys. I wish it wasn't like this. I wish the Bernie Sanders that Eddie and I donated countless money to, and the AOC, I wish they weren't a bunch of spineless cowards that sold out the working class and the working class people that funded their campaigns. But that's not the case. It's people like Tucker for some, for some fucking reason that's actually saying the truth and being a sensible voice in this time of, very dangerous crisis.
Well, that's very sexist of you to say. That's probably what AOC would respond. It's very sexist. That's where the left is at right now. Is so wrapped up in identity politics that they can't criticize war anymore. Like Brand said, the radical left used to criticize stuff like this, but as I've been saying lately, like there is a real radical socialist, pro-working class, anti-war movement forming in this country outside of Bernie and AOC and these people who betrayed us, these spineless cowards supporting the NATO proxy war in Ukraine, and calling anyone who criticizes them sexist or whatever, or a Putin supporter, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, got to take our wins where we can get them and acknowledge when people like Tucker are telling the truth and, that he was probably pushed out for telling the truth. So, yeah, do you got anything else you wanted to discuss or cover today, Carlos, for the stream?
No, it's been really great to have you back, brother. I thought the alone streams were fun, but nothing beats being able to bounce off ideas with you and to laugh. And it's great to have you back. And from the conversations we've had, you're back in a way that means that you'll be more active than I think ever before. And I'm planning on being more active than ever before. So I'm very excited to see what sort of growth our institute can have in the next few months.
Absolutely. It's great to be back, and thank you. Thank you for everyone helping support the trip to Vegas, but I'm so ready. I finished my last final for the healthcare administration grad program and this summer, and I'm probably going to be taking a break from that next year so I can just throw myself into Midwestern Marks. I've been exhausted. I've been run ragged with the work recently, but always try and find time for the streams because this is what I love to do. But yeah, like you said, over the next 3 months especially, we're going to be able to just do tons and tons of content for y'all. And I can't wait to see what kind of growth that leads to for the streams and for our other projects. So yeah, excited. And if you want to support it, you can follow Patreon.com or support us on patreon.com/MidwesternMarks. You can become a YouTube member. The YouTube super chats and stuff are also extremely helpful. And Twitch subscriber. I don't know. Am I missing anything?
The books, yeah. Check out our publishing press, books, midwesternmarks.com/books. You can pick up a copy of my book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, and a host of a bunch of other stuff that we've published and will be continuing to publish. We have a lot of exciting projects ahead of us. that we'll be beginning to crank out again in the next perhaps few weeks, maybe the next month will be the soonest you can expect our next book. And also check out our merch store. We'll probably be updating it with a bunch of more Midwestern Marks goodies fairly soon. So there's a lot of cool stuff there, though. I know that Noah loves wearing his tracksuit all over the place. He always gets questions, and it's a good opportunity for talking.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to offer that and appreciate the support in that aspect. Yeah, I got to finish my Venezuela book for the bookstore, and I have this crazy idea. I want to write like a fantasy novel, like an Ursula Le Guin type fantasy novel with Marxist messages. Obviously, that would be a long-term project, but I think people would be really interested in that. So yeah, it's a long-term project. Just to let you know what we'll be working on behind the scenes. But I'll try and get that Venezuela book to you before I start working on anything else. But yeah. Thank you for hanging out, y'all. Thank you to the moderators, all the people who gave super chats and super stickers. Couldn't do it without you. We're 3 seconds away from hitting the 2-hour mark. So let it hit 2 hours and say solidarity, and we'll see you next time, comrades. Sam Dixon, the sugar daddy of Midwestern Markets. Oh my God.